All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining today's webinar, Enhance Information Governance in Microsoft 365. We appreciate everyone joining here today, and the first thing I'd like to do is take a second and introduce today's speakers. My name is Shayna Horka, and I work in product marketing here at Gimmal, and I'm joined by our key speaker today, Director of Sales Engineering, Dean Misenhimer. And before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go through. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to submit them in the Q&A section on your screen, and we're going to answer as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. There will be at least one poll question that you'll see pop up, so please keep an eye out for that. All answers are anonymous. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know so we can assist you. All right, so to kick things off, I have a couple of slides here to tell you a little bit about how Gimmal can help you take control of your information with our suite of solutions. Gimmal is a records, information management, and governance software company founded in 2002. Our goal is to help you achieve your information governance goals by providing solutions that balance the value your information provides with the risk it also presents. Whether you're trying to discover information in unstructured data sources, migrate from legacy systems, or comply with policies across multiple repositories, Gimmal can help you achieve your information governance goals. We have a client success team and a global network of partners that deliver solutions in conjunction with our key partners like Microsoft and SAP. Gimmal's family of software products work together to let you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive solutions include migration, file analysis, electronic and physical records management, and document management in SAP. For those of you who are not new to our webinars, you might see a slight name change. They are the same solutions you know with just a more simplified name for your convenience. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Dean so he can get started with today's presentation.
Thank you, Shayna. So let's see, go forward one. There we go. So we're here today to talk about really just information governance in Microsoft 365. And so to begin that, let's just talk a little bit about the Microsoft 365 platform. You know, I don't think it's any secret to anybody that, you know, the platform has become pretty pervasive out there. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, one is it just provides a set of cloud services that provide, you know, a variety of different services, world-class security, and, you know, Gartner has securely positioned Microsoft as the leader in the content services Magic Quadrant. But if you go in and take a look at the latest Magic Quadrant from 2020, Microsoft's clearly in the leadership position. You know, and the quote on the right, that, you know, Microsoft 365 supports a broad range of use cases and is particularly strong in employee productivity. And that's one of the big appeals of it. And the platform has broad penetration in the marketplace. Microsoft 365 is in use at over 70% of the Fortune 500 companies. That's massive market penetration for any software product. The user base, you know, is, the last time I looked, is well over 250 million users are licensed for Microsoft 365 and using, you know, some or all of the various services that are in the platform. Collaboration is one of the key aspects of the platform. And I think over the last 12 months, we've also all really come to appreciate the capabilities that that platform brings, right? We've all been engaged in Teams meetings. We've all been doing, you know, collaborative authoring of documents. We've all been trying to share information more effectively now that there's been much more of a, you know, of a work from home situation over the last 12 months. And there are over 75 million users in Teams on a daily basis, right? That's a very large number. And then lastly, you know, Microsoft continues to invest in and expand the Microsoft 365 platform, continuing to build out and extend the information governance tools that the platform provides out of the box. And I've shown this slide before, and I like it because it really sums up, all of the different services and all of the capabilities that the platform brings to the table. There's a breadth of different services available, and companies use some or all of these different services. OneDrive and the Office tools get used for content creation, right? Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneDrive for working on your draft content. Teams and SharePoint get used for collaborating on content, right? For being able to share that content with your coworkers, get together, look at it, review it, work on it, be able to manage version histories of the content. And those two tools are tightly integrated with each other. The Power Platform, Power Automate, or what you may have known as Flow, Power Apps, Power BI, provide a platform for both process automation as well as business intelligence, right? Being able to visualize and see and manage the business process behind the content. Microsoft Cortex for machine learning and artificial intelligence. And we'll be talking a little bit about one of the first apps built on Cortex, Microsoft Syntex. And then Security and Compliance Center for information governance, right? With retention labels and data loss prevention and other capabilities that are built into the core platform, right? These are all of the different services that, as a Microsoft 365 user, you can take advantage of, and you can use, and you can involve in your daily business activities. But as a result, a lot of content is being created, right? Being created very rapidly, very efficiently, and where's all that content going? Right? What's happening to all that content that we're all creating every day and collaborating on and sharing and using throughout these services? Well, it all goes into SharePoint, right? Well, no, it doesn't. And that's one of the challenges. Everything doesn't go into a SharePoint repository. Microsoft 365 stores content in a lot of different locations besides just SharePoint. We've probably all experienced how the automatic save options in Office may save copies of a document for us without us meaning to, right? You go into a SharePoint library, you open the corporate template, and you start working, but you don't save a copy into your OneDrive or into your work area, and now it overwrites the template because it auto saves for you, trying to help you out. So those kind of things can happen, right? Sometimes stuff just gets saved without you even realizing it, and you may wind up now with 2 copies. Teams, right? We all use Teams quite a bit daily, multiple times a day we're in Teams meetings. And every time a new team gets created, there's a SharePoint site that's created for that team, right? If you go to the top of Teams, there's a section called Files, and if you click that, it opens up and you'll see documents, and you'll see a folder for each channel that's in your team. That's all stored in a SharePoint library behind the scenes. And if you look closely, there's an option in Files to say Open in SharePoint, and it will actually open that Files area in a SharePoint site collection in your browser for you. It'll take you right to that SharePoint site, and you can work with the content directly through SharePoint if you want to. So it's pretty convenient. But what if you're collaborating with somebody and you're having a discussion and you just want to share a document with them real quick, so you just drag and drop the document into your conversation in the channel? That document does not go into the SharePoint site created by the team. Rather, that document goes into a folder in your personal OneDrive. Right? So now Teams is putting content in 2 different places. And then there's my email, right? We all know, we all get lots of emails, and depending on your organization, you may get 20 emails a day, you may get 200 emails a day. I've worked at companies that were at both ends of that extreme. And emails have attachments, right? So we have to deal with all of that. And sometimes we save those attachments to our desktop, or we save them into OneDrive, or you may have email integrated with SharePoint where you can drag and drop things. But users can also save all their emails out to a PST file, right? And when they move to a new location or when they change jobs, they may bring those PST files with them. Or email can have archives set up so that I can take emails out of my inbox that I want to keep, but I don't reference that much, and put them into my archive. And the dangerous thing about archives is they don't have a fixed limit. They can be created where they're auto-expanding. So stuff just kind of continuously goes in, but nothing may ever come out. And then there's OneDrive, right? How many of you use your OneDrive locations? OneDrive was really designed to be a personal work area to create and draft and work on content. And then it was ready to be collaborated on and shared. You moved it to SharePoint and you collaborated with your team. Well, a lot of people use OneDrive now as their personal document management system, right? And they have these elaborate folder structures in OneDrive. And do users ever delete anything from their OneDrive? When was the last time you went through your OneDrive and did some house cleaning? Think about it. Now extrapolate that across your entire organization. And you start to begin to see the challenge that can build up in tracking and keeping your eyes around what's out there. And this leads to information chaos. How many places now does content start to exist? How many OneDrive locations do you have in your organization? Right? Do you know? Do you know how many OneDrives are out there? Or do you know if you looked across your network, how many PST files you might find or email archives you might find out there? Do you have a good handle, visibility into that? And what's out there? What's in all of those locations? How many files are in those OneDrive locations? How many OneDrive locations are empty? Are there any? People putting multimedia files out there, large files. If you were a SharePoint user before Microsoft 365, so you got in early, and maybe you deployed SharePoint back in the 2010 days or the 2013 days, and you still have some of those sites around. Do you even know what's in them anymore? Are the people who put content out into those sites still around the organization, right? So there may be information that's not even in Microsoft 365 that's still sitting out there. And then across all of these data sources, is there sensitive information out there, right? Do those documents contain PII data? Do they contain sensitive company information on products that are in development? Or if you work in certain industries or in government, is there information that might be considered confidential, unclassified information, right? What is out there? Right? Is it being managed properly? What if I get a privacy request? All right, what if I get a request from Shana to remove every document that has Shana Horka at Gimmal.com in it? Can I find all that information? And am I at risk? Right? Are we disposing of information when we should? How long is information being kept out there in these data sources? Does anyone delete anything? Right? And that's really the big question is, do I have visibility and am I disposing of things when I should be? Well, the good news is the Microsoft platform brings some good native capabilities for information governance, right? So all is not lost. There's great tools like Microsoft Syntex, right, where you can use machine learning and artificial intelligence to identify what's out there. There are retention labels in Microsoft 365 that apply retention policies to content. And there's the ability to manage the disposition process. And so manage the review and approval for disposition of content. Those are part of those native services around Cortex and Syntex and Security and Compliance Center that I mentioned earlier. Excuse me. Microsoft Syntex, if you're not familiar with it, is an artificial intelligence machine learning engine that is part of the Microsoft 365 platform. And you can teach Syntex to learn to identify certain types of files and then be able to classify and label those files for you. So if you have SharePoint sites out there with information in it, or you're migrating content in and you really don't have a good handle on what all that content is, you can create a Syntex model and then you can train it to identify certain types of content. So maybe I have purchase orders and invoices, or I have agreements and contracts. I can take a large set of agreements, put those into Microsoft 365, and train Syntex on what an agreement is. I train the model how to identify the content, right? So it'll look at different formats, look at different wording, different file types, and then I train it to look for phrases and patterns that help me identify, oh, this is a contract. I see terms and agreement date and force majeure and the word contract, or, I can train it on what to look for to learn how to identify what a specific type of document is. So now it will know, as it looks at new documents, what is and what is not an agreement or a contract. And so what do I do after that? Well, then I can begin to set up the governance controls to say, okay, now that I know how to identify what's an agreement and what's not an agreement, and I've trained Syntex on how to do that, I want to make that information valuable. Now I want to be able to build in the governance so that Syntex can automatically tag the content based on that model I created. It can go through, and when it sees an agreement, I can teach it what type of data to extract out. Pull out dates or project names or vendor IDs or whatever it is that I need, and use that to populate metadata columns about that content, to add tags to that content, and to give me a confidence score. If you look at the screenshot there, the next to last column is a confidence score. How sure is Syntex that what it found is an agreement and that all this information is correct? Right? So I can quickly do things now like begin to sort my content based on any of these properties or based on the confidence score. I can do filtering. I can do search. And more importantly, I can begin to use tools like Gimmal Records to leverage all of those properties to drive record retention and record classification downstream. To help you get Syntex configured, to get Syntex working, to build the models, that's an area that Gimmal can help our clients. We're a preferred partner in Microsoft's Content Services program, right? We've gone through training in Syntex, and we can help clients get started with it in an effective and very efficient manner so you can leverage the power of the platform that you already have, right? You can leverage that machine learning engine if you license Syntex. And then there's labels and disposition in Microsoft 365. Well, the great thing about labels is they're portable. If I apply retention labels to content in Microsoft 365, as that content moves from site to site, the label's going to go with it. And labels can apply retention policies on my content. So I can apply a label to something. Maybe I consider it to be classified, or I consider it to be confidential, or I consider it to be internal use only. And that may associate retention then to that content automatically. That retention can trigger a disposition review, right? So that at the end of the life cycle, I can send it to one person or a group of people for review to approve the disposition. So for some companies, that may very well meet your basic retention needs. That's all you need, right? You're doing basic retention on your content, and you're disposing of stuff when you need to. But what if that's not enough, right? One of the challenges with labels is if you don't have an E5 license, labels have to be manually applied, or you have to set defaults on libraries and things like that so that anything that goes into that library is going to pick up the same label, right? Or the users have to select from a list of labels and apply the appropriate label. It can take a while to deploy labels. When I create new labels and I publish those for use, it can take up to 7 days for those to become available. And if I want to put permissions on my label so I can control who can see which labels, different departments may want to have different labels available, I have to manage permissions on my labels, which can get a little complicated. And then I'm kind of limited on that review in that I really just have a single phase action that I can take. I can do nothing at the end of a retention, or I can delete something at the end of a retention. I can't take something through a stage of, after a year, lock this so it's no longer editable, keep it another 4 years, and then dispose of it, right? And it's not designed for records managers, right? If you look at the interface for Security and Compliance Center, and a lot of the tools in there, they're somewhat technical in nature. They're not always the most intuitive tools, and the biggest limiting factor for labels, disposition, and quite frankly for Syntex is it only works for content that is in the Microsoft 365 environment. right? It's designed to work on content that is in that environment. And so that's where Gimmal can begin to add some additional value for information governance to work with the platform and with your other content that you may have. Gimmal Discover, that Shana mentioned at the beginning, is all about providing file analysis on content across your Microsoft 365 environment and for data sources outside of Microsoft 365. It gives me the ability to create analytic policies and workflows that can go look at file content either in an on-demand, go analyze OneDrive, or go analyze my email in Exchange Web Services, or run on a schedule, right? Run once a month and go look for files that are over 5 years old in OneDrive, for example, or every month go analyze my email archives in Exchange Online. And it starts to give me visibility into what's out of my network. So I can crawl and look at Exchange Online and OneDrive and SharePoint Online, as well as SharePoint on-premise and my network file shares, right? I can run analytics across all of those on a consistent basis and begin to analyze the content, right? Once I know and I've analyzed the content, I can identify what's out there. Now I can begin to report on that data. And I can begin to classify that data and add labels to it beyond just the labels that Microsoft 365 can add. And once I know what's out there, once I've classified it and I've generated reports, I can now take action on that information. I can start to make intelligent decisions because I might want to migrate content to Microsoft 365, but I can migrate the high value content. I can migrate the things I really need up there. Lower value content, I might need to keep it, but maybe I keep it on file shares for a while, right? I can decide what to delete, what to retain, and what to migrate. And I can begin to do this across the multiple data sources, right? So there's more than just SharePoint and email to deal with. There's file systems, there's email archives, there's those troublesome PST files, right? I can go out and look across the network and find all of the emails in the PST files and tell users, look, our policy is no more PST files. Either move the content to your email, move it into SharePoint, or get rid of it, because I now know what's out there. I can do analytic workflows and policies that can take action on things based on what I find. So I can use a variety of different analytic methods. Go out and look at all of my email and find emails over 5 years old, or go look at my network file share and find files that are over 5 years old that haven't been accessed in the last 6 months. So not only am I looking at the age of the file, I'm also looking at the last access date to see, well, why is this stuff out there if nobody's accessing it? Or go look for PII information across all of my data sources. Look in SharePoint Online, look at OneDrive, look at my old SharePoint on-premise and sites, look at network file shares or even desktop workstations, right? And look for anything that might contain a credit card number or a social security number, or a tax ID number, right? Or go find all those PST files, right? A variety of different analytics methods, and I can take actions based on what I find. I can label files, right? So just like Syntex can label my content in SharePoint Online, I can do similar labeling on content sitting out on my file shares. If it has certain terms or words that make me think this is confidential, unclassified information, or it's a contract, label it as such so I can put the right policy around it later. Or if I find information that makes me think this is a medical record or contains PII data, move that document to my S drive so it can be analyzed, or it can all be collected there and then we can migrate it. Or go find everything in OneDrive that's older than 2 years, because now I can go question my users. OneDrive is for draft content and working files. Once something is final, it should be moved out of OneDrive. Why is this stuff in your OneDrive that's over 2 years old? And I can do that. The screenshot there on the right is a shot of Gimmal Discover. It gives you a very visual interface for doing this type of analysis. And then there's records management. right? I might need more than just basic retention. I might need to be able to classify records, to organize records into case files, to take things through multi-phase disposition processes. I might need to be able to put things on legal hold and do that not just for content in SharePoint Online, but also for SharePoint on-premise, and also for content in and network file shares in other locations. Right? Centralizing all of your records in Microsoft 365 is a really, really big task. Gimmal Migrate can help with that, but still, getting everything migrated into Microsoft 365, we talk to clients that have a petabyte of content out on file shares. You can't just pick that up and quickly move it, right? It takes time. So you may have file share content. You may have legacy ECM systems that are tightly embedded in certain business processes that you can't just take offline. And you may have on-premise SharePoint environments. And so having the ability to migrate things when you need to be able to manage records in place in those repositories from a central records management console that Gimmal Records provides gives you a lot more flexibility. Yes, we want to migrate things into Microsoft 365 as we can, but now you have a path to be able to do that, right? And Gimmal Records can automatically classify records against your file plan, right? Associate them to the appropriate record class, put them under the right retention schedule. So now I've classified a record, I've put it under retention. That retention can be multiple phases. After 1 year, lock this record down. If it's in SharePoint, lock it. If it's on a file share, lock it so it's no longer editable. It can't be deleted. Now keep it for another 4 years. And at the end of 4 years, transfer a copy of the record to my state archive or dispose of that record, right? And create a destruction certificate and an archive entry about the record so I know what was disposed of when, and it was done in a defensible fashion. And provide a single console designed for a records manager to be able to do that. Right. Gimmal Records Gimmal Records was designed for records managers, right? It's a dedicated user interface for the records management team. I have one view of my records in Microsoft 365 and out, right? I can create my file plan, my classification rules, my retention life cycles, and we haven't even mentioned your physical records, because most of you still have boxes on shelves in a file room, in a warehouse, or offsite somewhere that also need to be managed under the same type of retention, right? Paper has not gone away yet. So, apply consistent policy to all of your records, regardless of the location or the format of those records, and manage the disposition, review, and approval, regardless of how simple or how complex that retention and then review and approval may need to be. So we're coming up on the bottom of the hour. I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. If you want to know more, we have some great blogs out on our website at blog.gimmal.com. Here are just a few. Look how happy that guy is reading our blogs. You can be happy like him too. So go out and take a look at some of the content that's out there. And with that, we're going to open it up for a quick poll question. And while we do the poll, please start typing in your questions in the Q&A panel.
Yeah, Dean, I'll go ahead and ask some questions just so we can maximize our time here. So the first question we have is, how does Gimmal Records integrate with syntax?
So all of that metadata and that tags, once you build the machine, the model in syntax, and it knows how to identify and tag things, all of that information that syntax now associates to a document in SharePoint, Gimmal Records picks up. We capture those properties. The document stays in Microsoft 365. Those properties become available to Gimmal to use to drive record classification, to trigger retention, to trigger legal hold, whatever it may be. That just becomes additional information that Gimmal can leverage.
Great. And the next one we have is, does Gimmal work with Microsoft 365 labels?
It does. So if you're using labels in Microsoft 365, it's a great additional piece of information to be able to have on your content. And again, that becomes an additional property that Gimmal Records is capturing and can now use to trigger retention or to, to drive the record classification. So it's just another available piece of information for us.
Right, the next one we have is, do you manage and analyze files in SharePoint on premises?
We do. So, as I mentioned, a lot of folks got started with SharePoint, some as far back as SharePoint 2007. And they've moved to 2010 or they've gone to 2013. Some are at 2016. But there's still content out there in those on-premise environments, and they may not want to initially migrate all of that. We can analyze that content. We can tell you what's out there and help you make decisions on what should be migrated and maybe what you want to let live its life out where it's at.
Great, and we have one more, which is convenient because we were 2 minutes over in the chat. How can we find out more around Gimmal security controls?
Excuse me, just reach out to us, and I'll go ahead and click to the next slide here. Reach out to us at through our contact information, and if there are specific security questions you have, just put those into the email. If they're more broad around kind of how we can fit into into the security program that you may have, especially we've answered a lot of security questionnaires with government and other organizations, so we can certainly have discussions around both how we fit into your overall security security protocols, as well as what type of security Gimmal can provide on the information that we're managing. So it's kind of a broad question.
Yeah, and with that, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to email us at info@gimmal.com right there on the screen, or you can visit our website for more information. For those interested in today's recording of the webinar, we're going to send it out in the form of a thank you email between 24 and 48 hours. We hope that you guys join us next week for our next webinar, where we will be presenting a solutions showcase of Gimmal Migrate. But we thank you all for joining and hope you have a great rest of your day.